In today's video, I'm going to talk about Generation Z housing trends and how this generation is impacting the real estate market, and you're going to be surprised as to some of the findings that I was able to locate. And it's all going to begin right after this. Hi everyone, Josh Tavares, Realtor at eXp Realty, covering the Greater Toronto Area. It would mean so much if you can help us out. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to get updates on our newly uploaded content. And if you want access to our seller's guide, comment seller's guide down below and we'll send that your way. Without further ado, let's begin. 37% of Generation Z are expecting to purchase their first home in the next 5 years, while 43% are anticipating to purchase their first home between 5 and 10 years. And hovering around 30% are anticipating to purchase their first home between 5 and even 8 years. 30% of Generation Z are anticipating to purchase their first home in the price range of $350,000 to $499,000. Now 26% are anticipating to purchase their first home in the price range hovering of $500,000 and $750,000. Now half of this generation is anticipating their first purchase to be a higher density housing such as condominiums. Now 18% of Generation Z are anticipating their first purchase to be either a townhome, semi, or a detached home, with about 7% anticipating to purchase a duplex, a triplex, or a multi-unit property in general. Now 67% of Generation Z are anticipating to fund their own down payments, while 25% of the generation anticipates to receive some sort of financial gift from family, and 24% of the generation is anticipating of having mortgage financing as a down payment as well, with hovering around 18 and 16% anticipating funding to come in the forms of stocks and bonds as well as inheritance. And as Generation Z continues to get older, they have a stronger influence on the market, especially in larger hubs such as Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, Vancouver, any large city centers in Toronto. As they get older, they have a stronger influence on the real estate market as a whole. With many financial barriers taking place at this current time, with high cost of living and inflation continuing to be high, this generation continues to seek out full-time employment more than half, and using that with its higher income sources to obtain financing for real estate. Now, in order to make homeownership possible, this generation, 42% are willing to cut back on personal spending, while 41% are willing to obtain a secondary job. 37% of this generation is open to cutting back on its personal spending of eating out, and 30% of this generation is more than open to living at home for a longer time frame, cutting back on vacations, and delaying having children in order to obtain home ownership. And because of the many financial barriers, this generation ideally, of course, wants to own their home outright. About 41% are anticipating to own their home outright, where about 23% are willing to have co-ownership agreements with their family being involved on title in order for them to receive financing and own the home in general. While 30% are willing to work alongside with their friends and co-own properties with them in order to get into the home ownership market. Now, members of Generation Z are more likely for co-ownership, especially in larger townships with a larger population, higher price points, and higher inflation and cost of living, such as Toronto and Vancouver. It's fantastic to see that Generation Z has a strong sense of home ownership alongside with millennials, Gen Zs, baby boomers, and other past generations. Because of the high cost of ownership and cost of living, this generation is super resourceful and willing to do what it takes to obtain financing. You're going to see a lot of creative financing measures and people involved in home ownership that at later points they may be able to buy them out when they have secured a high amount of equity within 5 to 10 year position points later on in their lifetime. And with places like Toronto having home ownership on average being worth about $1.2 million for a detached home, we're still seeing this generation being very optimistic and hopeful to purchase their first property within the next 5 years. 30% of the generation is expecting to purchase a property less than $350,000 to $100,000. 23% of the population is anticipating to spend in the range of $350,000 all the way to $500,000, while 29% of the population is anticipating to spend between $500,000 and $750,000. Members of Generation Z are more likely to spend $750,000 $150,000 if they can, more likely than in larger Canadian areas such as Calgary, where you can get a detached home for under $500,000. And it's great to see with this generation they use a high volume of self-sufficiency in order to build up that down payment by cutting back on expenses, living longer with family, and working other jobs in order to make it possible to obtain home ownership and have a strong down payment. And over 55% of the generation are more than willing to obtain full-time employment or a higher income standpoint in order to obtain home ownership. This generation may be arguably the last, if not one of the last generations to have a chance at obtaining home ownership, given all the economic fundamentals that are taking place, at least in a traditional sense. I think going forward, there could be a potential for other generations going forward to obtain home ownership, but there's going to have to be some creative stipulations through creative financing, inheritance being a stronger factor, and other forms of partnerships that are going to work in order to get other generations in the future to obtain home ownership in general. I hope this video is super helpful, insightful, and gives you all the information needed to understand the home ownership market for Generation Z. I'm Josh Tavares, Realtor with eXp Realty, covering the Greater Toronto Area. It would mean so much if you can help us out. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to get updates on our newly uploaded content. And if you want to know about the top 5 neighborhoods in Toronto, click the card above. I go totally in depth in the video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Take care.